The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter at 11:47 p.m., loud enough to cut through the silence. Mom didn't touch it. She just stared like the screen might explode. I leaned closer and read the message myself. "I'm leaving you, old woman. Tomorrow I'm away with my secretary. I took the money, don't be mad, huh?" The words felt greasy. Like fingerprints you couldn't wipe off. Mom finally whispered, "He sent it to the family chat by mistake." Her laugh came out wrong, too sharp, then gone. She typed back with hands that barely shook, "Good luck. My name is Madeline Pierce, I'm 14. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned." The house smelled like burned toast from earlier, still hanging in the air. Dad's shoes were gone. His closet door stood open, empty hangers swaying slightly, tapping the wall like a clock. I kept thinking, how does a person pack a life so fast? "Go to bed," Mom said, not looking at me. But I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor by my bedroom door, listening to the refrigerator hum and the neighbor's dog bark once, then stop. Around dawn, Mom walked past me carrying Dad's old briefcase, the one he never let anyone touch. "What's in there?" I asked. She hesitated. "Something he forgot." When the sun finally came up, Mom opened the briefcase on the table. Inside was a folder labeled with my dad's handwriting. And my name was on the first page. My name looked wrong on that page. Like it didn't belong there, like it had been planted. Mom slid the folder toward me but didn't open it. The kitchen light flickered once, then steadied, buzzing softly above us. Doors and lights, things that were supposed to protect, kept acting strange. Inside were bank statements, withdrawal slips, dates circled in red, amounts too big to feel real. Next to them was a photocopy of my birth certificate, creased and smudged, like it had been handled too many times by nervous hands. "Why would he need this?" I asked. Mom rubbed her thumb against the edge of the table, back and forth, back and forth. "Because the account was in my name," she said. "But linked to yours." The room felt smaller. I smelled coffee even though neither of us had made any. "So, he took my money?" She nodded once. "College fund. Trust money from Grandma. He moved it last night." My stomach dropped. Dad hadn't just left. He'd emptied the house on his way out. Mom's phone buzzed. A new message. She didn't open it right away. When she did, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "He's boarding," she said quietly. "Flying out of state." I looked at the open front door. Light poured in, bright and innocent, like nothing bad could cross it. "Can we stop it?" Mom closed the folder and stood up. "I already did." She reached into the briefcase and pulled out one last document, stamped, signed, official. "Because," she said, meeting my eyes, "he forgot something else." And at the top of the page was a date. Today. The date stared back at me like it knew something I didn't. Mom placed the document flat on the table, smoothing it once, the way she used to smooth my hair before picture day. The light above us buzzed again, then went quiet. I leaned in close enough to smell the ink. "Emergency injunction," I read slowly. Big words, sharp edges. "He moved the money illegally," Mom said. "Because he panicked. And because he underestimated how boring I can be when I'm determined." That made me laugh, just a puff of air, surprised. It felt wrong and right at the same time. The phone buzzed again. This time Mom answered. She didn't put it on speaker, but I could hear Dad anyway, his voice loud, thin, rushing. Something about a frozen account. Something about embarrassment at the airport. Something about how this was a misunderstanding. Mom listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said one sentence. "Come, clean. Turn around." She hung up and set the phone face down like closing a door. I watched the front window. Every car that passed made my shoulders jump. The house felt exposed, like it had lost a layer of skin. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to let it out. It smelled like dust and old toast. "What happens now?" I asked. Mom picked up the folder, then paused. She looked at me carefully. "Now," she said, "we let him explain his jokes to people who don't laugh." A knock echoed down the hall. Firm, official, not angry. Mom didn't flinch. She walked to the door and opened it wide. And for the first time since the text, the light stayed steady. Two men stood on the porch, both holding folders, both wearing the same careful expression, polite, distant, already informed. I stayed on the stairs, half hidden, my fingers hooked around the banister. The front door was wide open now. The morning light spilled across the floor like it was trying to listen. They spoke quietly with Mom. Words floated back to me in pieces. Account, authorization, minor beneficiary. Dad's name sounded different coming from strangers' mouths. Smaller. Less powerful. One of them glanced past Mom and noticed me. He nodded just once like I mattered. My stomach twisted. Mom signed something. Her pen scratched louder than it should have. When she finished, the man closed his folder with a soft, final thud. Doors closing again, but this time on purpose. After they left, the house felt hollow. Not sad. Just emptied of noise. Mom leaned against the door and slid down until she was sitting on the floor. I sat beside her without asking. The wood was cold through my jeans. He thought I'd panic, she said. Thought I'd beg. I pictured Dad at the airport, refreshing his phone, smiling at his own joke. The image cracked something inside me. Not grief, clarity. Mom wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, smearing mascara she didn't bother fixing. He'll call again. When? I asked. She looked at the lock, then at the light switch and flipped it off. Sunlight still filled the room. When he realizes, she said, that leaving was the easy part. And right on cue her phone buzzed again. Longer this time. Mom didn't answer the call. She let it buzz until it stopped, then placed the phone face down on the table like it was something sharp. The kitchen felt brighter without the screen lighting up every few seconds. I hadn't realized how much that buzzing controlled us until it was gone. Pack a bag, she said. Just essentials. My chest tightened. Are we leaving? She shook her head. No. We're preparing. I went to my room and opened my closet. The door creaked the same way it always had, but the sound hit different, like it was warning me. I shoved clothes into my backpack without folding. My hands smelled like detergent and panic. I added my notebook, the one where I wrote when things didn't make sense. I didn't know why I took it. I just knew I needed proof of who I was before everything changed. Downstairs, Mom opened the safe Dad never thought I knew about. The light inside flicked on, steady and calm. She pulled out documents. Marriage papers, trust records, emails printed and highlighted. Receipts of a life he thought he could erase with a text. Her phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. She hit play. Please, Dad said, his voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. This is getting out of hand. Mom stopped it halfway. He's scared, she said. Not angry. Not sad. Just certain. A knock sounded at the door, different from before. Not official. Familiar. Mom looked at me, then at the door. This, she said quietly, is where it starts to hurt him. And she reached for the handle. Mom opened the door just enough to see who it was. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind that meant she'd already decided something and was just being polite about it. Standing on the porch was Aunt Rachel, Dad's sister. Her hair was pulled back too tight like she'd rushed. She smelled like cold air and expensive perfume. I heard, Aunt Rachel said, stepping inside without being invited. He called me. Said things got complicated. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I felt it in my chest. Mom folded her arms. Did he tell you about the injunction? Aunt Rachel blinked. Once. He said you were overreacting. I sat on the stairs, quiet, watching. This was one of those moments adults thought kids didn't understand, but I understood everything. The shifting weight. The careful words. The way Aunt Rachel avoided looking at me. Mom slid a folder across the table. Read. Aunt Rachel flipped through it. Her mouth tightened. This could ruin him. Mom nodded. That was his choice. Silence settled. Thick. Uncomfortable. The light above the table flickered, then stayed on. Aunt Rachel exhaled sharply. What do you want? Mom didn't hesitate. The rest of the money. Today. And a statement, signed, confirming he acted alone. And if he doesn't? Aunt Rachel asked. Mom glanced at the door. Then at me. Then, she said calmly, we open every door he hoped would stay closed. Aunt Rachel stood up slowly. I'll talk to him. As she left, the door clicked shut again, clean, final. Mom turned to me. He'll fight back next. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from Dad. We need to talk. No. And this time I knew. He wasn't in control anymore. Dad didn't come alone. His car pulled into the driveway just after sunset, headlights cutting across the living room wall like searchlights. I watched from the stairs, heart thudding as the beams switched off. The house went dimmer but not darker. The light above the door stayed on, steady, waiting. Mom didn't ask me to go upstairs. She just said, "Stand where you can hear." The knock was careful. Practiced. She opened the door halfway. Doors again, never fully open, never fully closed. Dad stood there with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey kiddo," he said like we were late for ice cream. Behind him, the secretary lingered by the car, arms crossed, phone glowing in her hand. "I'll be quick," he told Mom. "Let's not make this messy." Mom stepped aside and let him in. The door closed. The lock clicked. He noticed. His shoulders stiffened. "I talked to Rachel," he said. "This has gone too far." Mom slid the folder onto the table. "Thicker now. New tabs. New dates. You moved money from a minor's trust. You forged consent. You texted evidence." He laughed once, sharp. "You're bluffing." I spoke before I could stop myself. "You said haha." Silence fell. He turned slowly, seeing me like he'd forgotten I existed. That hurt more than the yelling ever did. Mom tapped the folder. "Return everything. Sign the statement. Tonight." "And if I don't?" he asked. The light above us flickered, then held. Mom looked at the door. "Then tomorrow," she said, "everyone learns how you leave." Dad's phone buzzed. He checked it. His smile vanished. Outside, the car door slammed. And I realized the surprise wasn't waiting for him anymore. It had already arrived. Dad didn't stay long after that. He stood in the middle of the living room like he was waiting for applause that never came. The folder stayed on the table between him and Mom. Solid, quiet, undeniable. He signed. Slow at first, then faster, like getting it over with might shrink what he'd done. He didn't look at me when he finished. "I'll transfer the rest by morning," he muttered. Mom nodded once. No victory speech. No tears. Just acceptance. Like closing a door you should have shut years ago. The next day the money came back. Every dollar. The trust was locked so tight it might as well have been welded. By the end of the week, papers were filed, names corrected, stories rewritten without his permission. The school sent a letter to me, formal, apologetic, careful. Adults always got careful too late. Dad moved out of state with his secretary. The secretary didn't last. Neither did his reputation. People talk. Especially when texts get forwarded and jokes stop being funny. Mom repainted the kitchen a lighter color. She framed a photo of me from when I was little. Messy hair, missing tooth, and hung it by the door. Light hits it every morning now. Steady. Warm. Sometimes I still think about that text. How he thought leaving would be easy. My name is Madeline Pierce. I'm 14. And I learned this the hard way. The biggest surprises don't wait at the airport. They wait at home. Quietly. Until the door finally closes.